Welcome, everyone. Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, now that I've been thinking about my particular interviews that I had from the news media, and of course I was on the Art Bell show before it was the big time show on Friday night for I think it was 5 hours or 3 hours. It's 35 years ago. I don't recall. But I also was interviewed by the BBC and Louis Theroux for his Weird Weekends. Of course, he didn't tell me that was the name of the show, and I was also interviewed by by CNN for the American Experience, their longest running 60 minutes type show. And of course, all the media stuff and anybody who's going to be involved in media, contact everybody, whether it's an interview or not. But of course, most interviews you get, particularly on YouTube and I've seen other places, are really a bunch of yes men pat on the back interviews. You just use it to promote yourself. These people are so scared of not getting guests and wanting to lick the proverbial bottom of guests so that they can get $5 from YouTube that they don't have any credibility. And it's amazing how you listen to these people babble on and they never really come back. I still haven't seen a good interview or a professional one on YouTube from anyone. They're all pretty poor and they surround themselves with yes men or they interview people that they agree with so they can do that. But they don't ever ask hard questions. They never push a guest or anything else. And when they do it with their own prejudiced opinions, which are kind of laughable. So, getting into these interviews, let's talk about it. Now, I had these interviews based on my organization I had operating at that particular time, which was the Alien Resistance Movement, otherwise labeled known as ARM, A-R-M, Alien Resistance Movement. And this was aliens from space, so a lot of people thought that's some sort of aliens crossing the border being in California. The other issue is the fact that this later was changed to HARM, which is even a better hostile alien resistance movement, because there's always a problem with the alien resistance movement that we are killing or attacking positive aliens. We never did. We always worked with it. And I always recommend people do not try and harm anybody. You don't know who they are, and you certainly don't want to harm good people or attack them, which is so typical of the vulturous scumbucket human race. Certainly hostile abducting aliens, who, by the way, Louis Theroux was very sympathetic with. He said, well, you're harming these aliens. The raping, abducting, taking you against your will aliens. Yeah, that's right. Are you one of them, Louis, baby? Along with your buddy Jimmy Savile? Did you sit around looking for spaceships, or were they in control of you? But I want to go over these interviews here in terms of some interesting things that happened that just occurred to me. So one of the things that happened there, and few people understand the fact that, where I used to live was the Coachella Valley, better commonly thought of as Palm Springs area. Now, Palm Springs is one little town in the Coachella Valley, which is known by Palm Desert, Indian Wells, other places where they have big tennis matches. The entire valley is kind of made out with a whole bunch of golf courses and the stupidest people on the planet. And the Coachella Valley is the most corrupt valley probably in California because all the gangs moved there. The legitimate police department pushed them out of LA and other places. They went down there and they took over the entire towns, which they run easily there. So this is part of what goes on with your typical problems that are there. So the whole idea is that we have to understand that as the bigger picture there. And I will be doing some interesting information reporting on this place and what a horrific place it is to live because of the very high temperature, very high costs, and of course you have terrible winds there that kick up the sea bottom, which you get to inhale. So it's very toxic. It's a very bad place to live. I guess it would be fun if you're one of those idiots that chase a white ball with a stick, and there certainly are plenty of those courses there and resorts. So if you go at the right time and place, it's a pretty place, but it's been so overdeveloped it's turned into a sewer. And of course you have this real serious criminal activity going on down there. But beyond that kind of thing that happens in the Coachella Valley, you have what's always been an area that is heavily UFO based. And not too many people think of Palm Springs and think of UFOs. Well, you're wrong for a couple of reasons. Well, Palm Springs has always been thought as the playground of the rich and famous, but that's a very old dated thing from the 40s to about the 60s. Every movie star had a house there, and Elvis and so forth. So everybody. Frank Sinatra lived there most of his life, has a big estate there, and so many other people. And they still have a lot of condos there. Most people from Hollywood and the rich and famous have some sort of house down there because it's a good investment and a place to run if LA has a problem. When they had the LA riots, all the people in Hollywood went down to their Palm Springs homes. So this is so typical. So it was thought about that. Everybody's been there. Einstein, you name it, spent time there because it's quite beautiful for a month or two in the wintertime. After that, it's horribly hot. And as I said, they got horrible desert winds that ruin everything. But it is picturesque those 2 or 3 days a year that it's livable. But there's more to that. So people think, but that has radically changed. Now, this started to change dramatically in the 80s, where everybody was leaving that town, and it started to become a major place for the homosexual community. Palm Springs is now pretty much 100% homosexual. They've had homosexual mayors and everything else, and this started happening in the middle to late 80s, and now it's a big homosexual community, and that's what it's known for, and that's what people go there. So if you're a famous homosexual or a person in LA, I mean, they like to live and move there. Obviously, people feel comfortable around their own. So Palm Springs as city has been taken over by them. Remember, Palm Springs is just one of probably 10 or 15 communities that are in the Coachella Valley. As you head south down the main road on out of Palm Springs, you run into other communities, and particularly very wealthy communities like Rancho Mirage, Palm Desert, Indian Wells, where many movie stars, Red Skelton lived there, Lucille Ball, and you can see the age of people that live there. I'm not sure who still live there, but a lot of people are golf fanatics, and this is golf heaven. So the whole idea is that you have these type of situations there. So it has radically changed into a very wealthy communities outside of Palm Springs. And Palm Springs was voted not too long ago as one of the worst places to live in the country because there were no opportunities there. There's no work. There's no nothing there. So it's a place that a lot of gays went to party. And that's what it turned into. And whether it's good or bad, the truth is, the fact is that people don't, I'm sure the gays don't feel comfortable with the straights, and the straights don't feel comfortable with the gays. So they took over places like the Racquet Club and other places where people used to go down and play tennis, and people slowly left these places. So that's just the scoop, a quick scoop on the Coachella Valley and the Palm Springs area. But what is known before that? Now, it's very interesting that the entire Coachella Valley has huge amounts of UFO activity and that are seen there. Now, Palm Springs sits in, the reason why it's so hot is it kind of sits in this little valley, which causes winds to be created, which draws a lot of hot air to it. And of course, you can't get the airflow. There's a giant mountain on one side, and this blocks the valley from the ocean air, which technically over that hill is San Diego, which has perfect temperature. But the nice cool air doesn't get to that valley because of that mountain range. Now, that mountain range, which has places, which is, there's a main city there, is called Idlewild, which has pine trees, and you drive up this mountain, which is pretty steep, and you run into this kind of alpine and beautiful tree area. So that's kind of a nice thing, and I used to do this often to get out of the hot hellhole that that area was, and you're getting into these trees up there. Now, this is another hotbed of extraterrestrials. There's some different groups there, etc., and because it's a wooded, nice area, a lot of retreats there. I think they have a Buddhist place up there, etc., but it's infested with extraterrestrials. We cleaned them out a little bit at one time, but the bottom line is that there's a lot of negative energy up there. Also, Idlewild has every known disease up there because it doesn't get enough water. So all the trees are dying and the atmosphere up there isn't too good. Even the bubonic plague was up there in some of the animals. So it's a really hotbed because of the dyingness of that area, even though it is pretty. And it has a little town there with restaurants and everything else. So it's a pretty little place, Idlewild, and a lot of people from LA go up there as well because it's a close mountain community without having to drive too far. So you're still talking about 2 hours from downtown LA. But there has been sightings all over this valley, and particularly there was a particular road called Date Palm Road, and this intersected the number 10 interstate freeway. The number 10 interstate freeway, I believe, goes across the entire country. So you take this down to Arizona, go through Texas, I think it goes all the way over to Florida. So it's a very main route there, and it's a huge highway system there. But the intersection of Highway 10 and Date Palm, there is a little bridge there that goes over the main freeway. And, of course, you enter the freeway there. So I think I've seen about 5 or 10 times, I've seen giant green balls of light. And this is very common. If you look through the Palm Springs papers, you'll find people reporting these green balls of glowing light that shoot over the freeway into what is a tiny little hill range on the other side. And I witnessed this many times. I even stopped my car once to watch where was this green ball going to. And so, it's your typical green ball. And this certainly is a very strange phenomena. So it wasn't really a craft, or maybe it was of some sort. It's hard to say, but it was not identifiable as anything UFO type. It was just a big glowing ball of green light. So it's hard. What is that? Could this be some sort of Earth phenomena? Could be. As I've laid out, there really are not UFOs. And we should take that terminology, put it in a bag, and flush it. There are basically AFOs, alien flying objects. There are MFOs, military flying objects. And there are EFOs, Earth flying objects. So the whole idea is these are things that come from the Earth, come from the military, and have come from extraterrestrials. There's no such thing as a UFO, and certainly we can track anything on this planet that we want to. We don't do this because we don't want to, or we do it and we don't tell anybody about it. So these big glowing balls were seen by hundreds of people all the time, and there must be thousands that noticed this while they were driving on the freeway. But what do you do going 70 miles an hour and you see this green ball cross in front of you? Well, you don't think much of it. You maybe note it, maybe you don't, but it hasn't been investigated. And I watched where these balls of green giant energy went into, and it apparently looked like it went directly into the hill on the other side of the freeway. And you could actually see it almost like a little burst of light. It would hit the hill and it would kind of burst. But there was nothing left there. There's absolutely no noise, but a giant glowing. As I said, I've seen this many times. It wasn't just that. And I was at my peak alertness. I was going to work at the time. It usually happens around 10 to 12 at night. So you would go up there and you would see these green glowing balls shoot across the freeway. And this has been reported. Matter of fact, I just noticed this recently as I ran across some UFO footage or reports from someone in Palm Springs who said they saw this. I said, well, you saw what I saw. So, and this was reported by a security guard there. So this happens all the time. So you have this kind of phenomena, and there's a lot of extraterrestrial activity there. Maybe they like to play golf. I don't know. So maybe they wanted to see Elvis when he was alive. So, thank you very much. We got the UFOs. I want to thank the aliens for coming to my concert. So these are all the things that actually happened in that area. But there's a long history in this area that people are unfamiliar with. And this is also, you've got to remember, as I said, and of course, Idlewild, which is up that mountain, is loaded. I had a UFO meter up there that used to track. When I stayed up there one weekend, I had one of these meters that tracked electromagnetic fields and the disruption of them. And I had a little meter like that, and it went off every 5 minutes. I ended up turning it off. It had a setting that you could turn it down very low or very high, meaning more sensitive. And even with the lowest possible setting, it kept going off. So there was disturbances in the electromagnetic field above this particular house all the time and the area. So it's a strange, strange place, Idlewild. It's got a lot of weird energy and a lot of bad people up there. Unfortunately, although it's a beautiful little forested place, which, that's the beauty of Southern California. You've got the beaches, the deserts, and you can actually go up a hill and you're kind of in alpine conditions. So it was quite a nice place up there in terms of that, but bad energies. So, which from what I understand has all returned since I did after cleaning it out many, many years. It's been so long now. And of course, there's a lot of bad people up there and a lot of problems with that. So there are certain little groups that have camps up there and everything else, and of dubious credibilities as well. So these are types of things that we need to understand. So we have these different things in this area. But here is one of the places, and I've talked about this before. It's a place called Giant Rock. Now, Van Tassel, George Van Tassel, who built the Integratron, and there's Giant Rock, which is the largest freestanding rock on the planet, supposedly is at Giant Rock. And this was a meeting where Native Americans met. This is a giant vortex area, which I think is much stronger than other vortexes like Sedona. Now, Sedona is a much prettier area in terms of, the red rocks, the scenic drive there, and much larger. Now, Giant Rock is pretty small, and I grew to find the desert very attractive in its starkness. And before, I never really liked the desert. When I lived there, I kind of learned to appreciate the beauty of it, even though it's very rugged. And so the Integratron was built there by Van Tassel, and he ran a big business there. He had giant meetings for UFO people. So he had these giant UFO conventions there. Thousands of people would show up at Giant Rock. He ran a little restaurant there, and it became a huge event. He was the person who, I believe, he was the one who established the ASTAR Command. I'm not entirely sure what the pedigree of that is or not, but really a strange, bad group that they are from my contacts with them. But the ASTAR Command is what he met aliens, he claimed he took a ride on a spaceship, etc. All of them at Giant Rock, which originally was an old airport, and there is an old strip there. It's not really a paved strip, but it's very flat desert. That is all that's been. So you could land planes there and everything else, particularly small planes. And this was somewhat active. And there was a person who was at Giant Rock for years before him. And so there's a lot of weird stuff that actually went on there as well in general, not just extraterrestrial nature. So we had these big events. There were UFOs seen there all the time. This is a place that if you hang out and this is what the alien resistant movement, we used to go up there in the nighttime and watch UFOs and in general kind of mess with them with we had door cannons. We used to aim at them to see if we could affect the UFOs that were in that area. And we were making some contact psychically and physically to a small extent, at least astral projections of these entities that were positive. So it's a very interesting area and it's loaded with activity. And it's one of those places you don't hear people talk about, even though it's pretty close to civilization. There are stores and restaurants, about 5-10 miles away from Giant Rock. The roads to get to Giant Rock are pretty good. But this is where everybody had meetings, and they were huge in the 70s. I said Van Tassel had thousands of people there. And he was building the Integratron, which was you were supposed to walk through, and that it would restore your complete energy field, and you could live forever. That was never completed. And George Van Tassel was another strange guy, even though I believe he was a aerospace engineer. I forget his actual background. He wrote a couple of books. He had this weird Christian attitude, very typical of that time. And these events just skyrocketed. And what happened, apparently, I read on this, and I haven't studied too much recently, but Giant Rock, they had so many people there that it became problems. Apparently, the actual motorcycle gang groups, I don't know if it was the Hells Angels, started showing up there and causing trouble. And the local police refused to go there and anything because they were too afraid. The motorcycle group said, if you bring your police up here, we're going to kill them. And of course, being the heroes police are, they stayed away. So the whole idea is that this is the kind of things that happen there, and there was getting to be too dangerous after a huge play. So this is where people were meeting extraterrestrials. There's a lot of very cool energy up there. This is a vortex area, very strong one. I'll talk about my time machine experiments at this vortex in another lecture, but this is where we used to set up things. Now, if you want to break dimensions and do wild, crazy things like time travel, you really have to do it at some sort of vortex, because this is where you have a breaking in the dimensions. So you're able to do that kind of stuff easily with non-giant powered machines. Now, a lot of people use super amounts of electricity to cause all sorts of created electromagnetic vortexes, which is very dangerous and difficult to do, and you're going to have to really generate a lot of power, which is going to cause all sorts of problems. So that's another issue which we'll talk about in other times of actual time travel. But what I'm trying to do here is give you what happened here. Now, it's very interesting, of course, what happened when Louis Theroux showed up with his camera crew. I don't know, it must have been 6 or 8 people, I don't really remember. Is when they were landing at the Palm Springs airport, their plane dropped 10 feet as they were coming down to land, which is very dangerous. If you stop dropping like that and you're so close to the runway, well, you could just drop and hit the runway. Fortunately, I guess the pilot was able to pull it up enough, and this happened. Well, it was very frightening, and the crew was all kind of shaken by this. That actually happened there, and spoke with me about it. So that started this whole series of problems. Now, the bogus interview, which lasted unbelievable amounts of time. As I said, I spent over 12 hours with being conned by this guy and his chopping up so he could chop up 12 hours into 3 minutes, and then wanted to make something funny by going up to the vortex. So I took him up to the vortex area, and he claimed in his interview, which is a blatant misrepresentation, that I could call aliens. So we were going to go out. Well, I could never. If I could call aliens, I'd be the richest man in the world. I'd be more than happy to do it. The point is that that's not the case. There's nobody that I know of that can do that. So there was one guy who claimed to call UFOs one time, and it kind of worked at Las Vegas, but I don't know if that was ever repeated. Now, the bottom line is that he did that. He put on the helmet and the different guns we had, these psychic wave guns, all the stuff that I showed him that weren't really the tools we used, but they looked good. The whole idea is, and of course he made fun of all that stuff, including the technology, because he didn't understand it, just as all the other stuff. He didn't understand radionics, he didn't understand, remember, this is a scone and tea drinker that dresses like Charlie Brown and puts a bowl on his head to make a haircut. I mean, this is an ignorant, buffoonish person. And he knew absolutely nothing and has a negative about UFOs and aliens, and has a very negative opinion of it. He writes that in his book, that he considers UFO people to be nuts, and you've got some goofy little picture of something to prove it. This is the kind of things that he did. So the whole idea is you're not going to go around proving contact with extraterrestrials and live very long. So that's why I've never produced photos or anything else. What's the point of it? You argue whether they're real, and it just really is just a nail that's going to be hammered into your coffin. Particularly when you have goofballs like this who are supposed to be seeking truth or only seeking a ridiculous story. So the whole idea is he wanted me to do all sorts of things there, which I refused to do, run around with weapons and everything else. So the whole idea is that's not what we were going to put on a party for you. I'm not a monkey in a cage for you, and I don't want to be labeled as some dangerous nut running around with guns. So the whole idea is that's just not a reality. So we went there, and he did all sorts of stupid stuff and talked about things, thinking that they were being called. And they weren't, and that would never be the case. Again, a terrible misrepresentation to fit into his story of why he was up there. So instead of stating that we're going to go up there, investigate, and look for aliens, he said that we could call it. Again, a twisting of his lies and disinformation, which is so typical of him. So, along with all his other deviant activity that came out later and which he's involved with in later life there, including inviting known pedophiles to stay in his home. So the whole idea is this is the kind of guy you're talking about. This is the kind of guy that represents the BBC. But let's get into those things that actually went there as well. Now, what happened when we were driving up there on our own is the fact that all of a sudden, because we were gonna meet them up there, and they were following us. Is the first thing that happened when we entered in the roads going to Giant Rock. Now, these things never happened before. I had a bird run, and this is the desert. There ain't many birds out there. Okay. So the whole idea is that there are some, but they generally aren't around roads. It's very hot there. So I had a bird who ran directly into my windshield. Now, I've been up there hundreds of times, and I've never even I think I've probably seen birds, but never close. So this bird actually ran into my windshield and was killed by that. And just, this is pretty bizarre. So here we are turning off the road to go down the road to Giant Rock, and a bird runs into the window. Well, isn't that weird? So the whole idea is after that happened, all of a sudden, the air conditioning in my new car, I think it was a year or so old, a minivan, a Dodge minivan, the car of the year, which was a beautiful old car, but the air conditioning just clicked off. It just broke. Well, how weird is that again? And why was it doing it there? It wasn't a particularly hot day that day, but it's always hot in the desert, so you're always running your air conditioning, but all of a sudden it just clicked off. Well, how weird is that again? So the whole idea is that's all part of the reality of what's going on to the entire process of these kind of strange things happening. So it was really kind of strange. And why would this happen all of a sudden? I've been up there hundreds of times, never had a problem with birds hitting me, coming near me, or any kind of phenomenon like that. I've never had any car trouble up there, no matter what time I went there. So this was a very strange occasion that these things would happen. So it's very interesting to note that in terms of these little occurrences. You may think they're minor, but this is how things are happening. So we just don't quite understand that. It appears that there was some sort of minor flash, even though it wasn't a strong flash like a light bulb, that somehow happened that then hit the van and knocked out the air conditioning. Didn't knock out anything else, thank God. I would have been having problems there. So I'm not sure what exactly happened there, but very strange, just like the actual bird hitting it. So what is going on here with this whole thing? I think at the very least, it's a warning to be careful of this turd who is interviewing us. So very, very interesting, and that's a fun little story there. And again, this comes from real life. This isn't related by some goofball or somebody's hearsay or anything else. This happened to me personally, so we know what that happens. And again, there are other people with me on these occasions. So this is the kind of things that happen there. And of course, you have the typical nonsense. Now, nothing really happened when turdish goofball Charlie Brown was interviewing there, taking bits. There wasn't anything overly strange there. So we concluded that and all the crap that goes with that, and the problems of being abused by spending hours and hours for something we got nothing from. And you got to remember, they don't put your address up there. I don't know if we had an address or the internet at that particular time, but they don't do that in the show. They don't do it at the end of the show. You sign off all your rights, and of course Thoreau went on to publish a book, which I am the first one in his books of Wild Weekends, to make more money off of me. Did I see anything? No. That's their robber baron, rape you attitude that you make them lots of money. He is worth $4 million right now and loves to have pedophiles as guests in his house. What a charming chap. Can I have a cup of tea? So the whole idea is that's the reality. Now, what happened here, and we'll move ahead now to the CNN, which is supposed to be a broadcast for the American experience, but they're just reporters. I don't know if this person, I don't remember their name or anything else. It's hard to find the CNN show on TV anywhere. Of course, Louis is still making money off of me, as he tried to make more money off of me recently to have an interview during COVID. Yeah, I really want to talk to you, boob. So the whole idea is that the CNN reporter then was there, and she played the same game, and I complained to her. I said, look, BBC was here, and they spent 12 hours and got nothing from it. So the whole idea is that I don't want to do this again, and I'm not spending hours and hours with you, even though I've probably spent too much time. And of course, they know nothing about this subject matter. So they hunt around your house, they look for every picture they can take, they talk about non-essential stuff. They call it B-roll film, but there isn't a B-roll in this, meaning extra film, because of the fact that it's only 3 minutes or less. Maybe, I don't know what it was in these things or not. It's like 3 minutes, and that's it, which you really can't get anything past there. And but they're going to spend 12 hours with you to get 3 minutes, and they're going to pick the most embarrassing, stupid stuff they can. So I don't know how long the CNN was. I think it was a little more than that. But, you give them all the information, and they cut that out. So what happened with that, of course, is that we showed them different information, and I wanted to check, particularly the producer wanted me to check to see if she had an implant. So, of course, we took a picture of her to do that and place it on our radionic machine. And, of course, we went through it, and, of course, she didn't have an implant. And I said, we're going up into an abduction area. It's best, as we do, we carry anti-abduction discs so that you won't be abducted physically. Now, you can always be psychically attacked. You really can't stop that, but they can't physically take you and implant you if you have one of our discs on us, and the technology was given to us by positive extraterrestrials. A very almost primitive looking thing, but very potent, and have saved many people from being abducted. And we have reports from people that had these discs in their home, and the Greys tried to materialize in their house, and that's how they work. They materialize in there, and when they came close to the disc, which is about 5 or 6 feet, they started vibrating and then left. They turned back into energy and left the house. They couldn't take the frequency. So the whole idea, that's exactly what happened with those. I said, you should carry this disc when we go up there. And of course, when we were about to leave, she made sure she took her picture off of the actual machine so that she could keep it and so forth. So, all these people that want to be naysayer. So she wanted us, we got a little blurb there, she wanted us to go up, I think it was the next day, up to Giant Rock, to the Vortex area where there's activity, and wanted me to be up there at 8:30. I said, I'm not being up there at 8:30, I'll get there, because I'm not a morning person to begin with, particularly then. I said I'll be up there at noon, and they had a kind of a fit. So she went up there at 8:30 and interviewed the stooge, lame-o hillbilly that was a distant relative of Van Tassel, who built the Integratron next to Giant Rock up there. So, and of course, he was an expert. She asked her, do you think you can fight it? I can't do that. I don't have enough whiskey. I'll have to ask my wife, my sister, to see if we can actually do that. So the whole idea is that she got the bogus idiot she could find out there so that she could put that person against me on the same. So you can see how they're assassinating me right on the show that they're showing me. How insulting is that, CNN? And of course, that's because she didn't like my attitude. But of course, being the little dump bitch that she was, that's exactly what you do. But she made sure she had enough faith in what we were doing to take her photograph back. So she was given an anti-abduction disc as well. And a little thing happened when we were doing the interview with her. First of all, we saw this giant tarantula, which are in the desert. There are deserts in the tarantula, but this must have been at least 8 to 12 inches. It was a huge tarantula that was crawling around a Giant Rock, which I've never seen any of this when I was up there by myself, particularly with quiet situations. There was never any of this. All of a sudden, we ran into this kind of activity again. Now, what were these things? What was the actual bird that hit us originally? Was this something that was real or not? So, and here we go yet again. And now I'm talking to her walking around Giant Rock, and what is the next thing that we actually runs up is a guy who apparently came out of a big RV that was parked a while ago, comes up to me and says, well, what's going on here? Now, this guy looked exactly like the late, great Van Tassel, identical to him. Well, I even told that to the reporter. I said, this guy looks exactly like Van Tassel. And he talked to us, and we said, well, nothing's really going on. You're in an interview. And a couple of minutes later, he disappeared, and so did the RV. And he couldn't have the RV was parked quite a bit away, so it just disappeared. So here again, here's some weird, wild stuff. So, and of course, her being the doofus interviewer and the people running the cameras didn't pay much attention to any of that when they should have, because they don't know nothing. So, maybe they should have talked to the bogus hillbilly that was staying there living off of Granddaddy. But the whole idea is that nothing else really happened there except her wasting her time trying to set up different things. And, you know, this is supposed to be a news show. Can't set stuff up. And the cameramen were so sick of it that they said that. And they argued with her, look, don't set things up here. You can't do that. So they corrected the producer and, of course, finally ending the interviewer, and he apologized for wasting our time, the cameraman. So I don't know what that was, but again, when this was shown, it was not shown on the American Experience because we were too weird. They put us somewhere else between other weirdos, which I found great offense to, being on the American Experience. And not only that, with CNN, I said, well, at that time, it was a fairly new show. And I said, I don't know the American Experience. I don't get cable. Send me a videotape of it. So they sent me a videotape of it to show the American Experience. This is what the show's about. This is what you're going to be on. Liars. I've asked people to give me, including the BBC, to send me a videotape of my interview. Never got it. And so many things you never get, just like you never got it with CNN. And they deliberately misrepresented themselves by sending me a tape to a show that we did not appear on and stating that it would be on there. Now, obviously, they can put it wherever they want, but that's not the point. If somebody says you're going to be on 60 Minutes and you end up on the local news as a 2-minute joke thing, well, you've been deceived. So here we go again with the great media. They lie to you. They didn't want to do that. And I'm sure that the producer pushed that. I mean, this is a pretty fascinating story if you think about it. So, unfortunately, this isn't a comic book. You're not going to show combat, and you don't get combat with different, and I'll talk about it. You don't get in combat with extraterrestrials. They are too superior. It doesn't work like that. First of all, the Greys that I dealt with were basically androids. They were not real. These were things that were sent out as robots of a biological nature to do research. You're not going to travel, 1,000 light years by yourself and leave your family. You're going to send out these androids, and you can't make robots to function like humans. You need to have an android. So these were the type of things that I worked with, and these are the type of things that popped into your house, that were dematerialized, that grabbed you physically and abducted you, and also did implants and all the things that go with that. That's all part of it to the reality that is going on there, so we can all understand that. So you're not getting into it. We never met with any reptilians or any other groups. They were all Greys, generally of the small type, and these were people that were doing the abducting at that particular time and around the different. I'm going to have some added stories of what we've done, but that were the types. These weren't warrior types. They didn't have direct weapons, even though they have weapons and beam weapons in their ships, which at times we even were hit with and knocked people down, etc. But and had some problems that way because of these things. And I'm assuming they had deadly weapons as well. But they were not looking for fights. And if you gave them any problems or something, they just left. What's the point? So, but you're not going out there like Star Wars and shooting ray guns at them. Also, these were psychically controlled gray aliens. Everything they did, as they do today, is done on a psychic level. So by aiming certain amplifying guns and other things at their energetic fields and their third eyes and their heads, you were able to disrupt their psychic abilities, getting them to materialize physically. When they materialize physically, then you could use edged weapons to take them out if the need be. Guns don't work generally. They're able, the gun is pretty primitive. It's basically a little, typical science. Oh, let's burn something. So you basically put a burning substance in a little closed container, and then you light it. That's what a bullet is, or a cartridge. So the whole idea is that that's how those things work. So the whole idea is once you're able to do that, but these kind of things, I don't know if there were fields coming from ships or other things, but these devices don't work well don't work at all. Sometimes when you use physical guns and try to shoot something, that they would just pop. Sometimes the bullets would fall out of the front of the guns. But in general, even if the gun operates, they don't basically, there's no importance to it. These are primitive little pieces of metal, and they have basically force fields, particularly on ships, that you're not going to hurt them with little metal bullets. So we need to understand that. So what we came into were people that were not armed or willing to fight. And the minute they ran into resistance, they would leave. But generally, they freeze people psychically. So if you're ready for a psychic battle, you are able to defend yourself without getting particularly hurt. But it's certainly an extremely fearful situation to be in, because you're fighting basically what are considered creatures of none. And you can't shoot them. I knew one guy, oh, as long as I got my guns, I'm okay. Well, guns don't work on extraterrestrials. They never have, and they're not going to as a general rule. There's a person who said he actually shot an extraterrestrial. I find that hard to believe. I don't know if they actually heard it, but generally guns are not going to work. I think it was Phil Snyder that claims he shot one. I don't know if he said he killed it or not, but generally these things don't work. So all of these things are part of this bigger understanding and game that goes on with the extraterrestrials and their contact. So, but there are many different types. There's many ways of it, but, the average android that are doing work and abducting people, as a general rule, are these type of pretty easily overcome if you're prepared. But you have to be prepared, and you have to be able to block them psychically, because they enter through your third eye and just immobilize you. It's just as simple as that. If you're prepared for that, and you have special equipment and other things like we had to strengthen our own psychic abilities and nullify their psychic attacks on us by grounding their energies away from us, then we were able to handle them in that. But, we weren't looking for fights. We were looking to interact on different ways, and of course we were looking mostly, our research involved in protecting people from being abducted and implanting, and removing implants, which we can do today radionically, at least disable them so that they don't work anymore. So these are all the things that we are researching into. This is serious, interesting work and dangerous work. You're dealing with strange things you have nothing about. So when these people come along and laugh at you and cause you problems, this just shows their inner lower being. And the bottom line is these kind of organizations should be supported so people can do something past what your criminal governments are going to do. So all of this is disinformation and criticizing people who are trying to do something serious out there. And we never got any contact from any UFO organization that would want to work with us. But you got to remember, the little alphabet organizations go around and tell these people not to work with you. They're threatened and everything else. So if you think anybody out there like Bob Lazar and other people are able to do what they're doing without having direct work and contact with the CIA, FBI, etc., you are living in turd land. You just don't get it. Because you don't have any freedom here, and they can take you out and stop you from many things. They'll just go talk to the producers and say, look, this is a violation of national security. This guy's a fraud. Don't put him on. Yes, I'm sure. I'll do whatever you tell me to. So that's exactly what happens. So don't think any of these people in the media is all controlled by organized crime and criminals anyway. Every single media person is. It's sad, but true. So about time everybody wakes up to that. So if you think there's any whistleblowers, well, they're allowed to do it for a particular reason. Bob Lazar is allowed to function because he has no credibility. So they can either come in and say, well, yeah, Bob was telling the right story if they want that, but they want people to talk about extraterrestrials and the crafts out there. They want to do this slowly. They want to get these thoughts into your consciousness from discreditable people and slowly filter it out there. Lazar's been around for 20 or 30 years, if not longer, and has no credit. Oh, that's that pimp guy. So he don't have no education. So. They trace him back to a junior college in the Valley of Los Angeles called Pierce College, which is basically an agricultural college, by the way. So the whole idea is that that's all he has credit to, not MIT, or maybe he does or not. So we just don't know. But this is the game they play, and they allow him to talk. If they don't, you would have problems. The other thing is if you talk or they don't like you, they'll take you out later in life. Now, they did this with Mac. What was Mac's first name? But Mac, the Harvard researcher into extraterrestrials, was was ran down in London on the street. A guy in a car, and he was walking with a bunch of other people, and he was the only person killed. Interesting. So they ran him down on the side. He's on a sidewalk watching in London, and somebody pulled off and ran him down. So the whole idea is this is what happens. So even if you put your information out there, they want to kill you. They don't want you to die naturally. And it doesn't matter how old you are. They're going to take you out to do that. I'm assuming the same thing will happen to Bob Lazar. And of course, oh, well, he was 70 or 80. Well, it doesn't matter. Did he die naturally? Well, whatever that means. No, they'll run you down on the streets. They'll kill you somehow. You'll die mysteriously. That's how it works, because they don't want to leave you to think that you got away with things. They want everybody to understand that they ultimately have control. So all of these things, anytime you come out, you put your head on the chopping block. And of course, this is one of the reasons why I have such harassment today as well. So these are all the things going on that we did up in that particularly interesting area. But I'm not, you don't hear much about Giant Rock. Everything you hear about is Sedona. I think the actual vortex in Giant Rock is much more powerful than Sedona. But Sedona has all these different energy fields there. It's very interesting. Sedona's also got a lot of really nasty energy. The Giant Rock vortex is a good vortex. It's an interesting there. It's easy to access, and but it's close to a giant military base, 29 Palms. On the other side of the hill, which I was just talking about, is San Diego, where all the military bases as well. And of course, it was in between this and a little town called Banning that I saw the B-1 jet anti-gravity plane 500 feet away. So, a lot of weird things happen in that particular area. There's some nefarious activities that happened at the local, and there's Indian reservation there, the Cabazon Indians, which conveniently made a huge deal with Arnold Schwarzenegger to pay money. 20 years later, they're going to pay. And then he credited himself to that budget. So his budget wasn't $20 billion over, because within 20 years, they were going to pay $20 billion of reduced taxes. These are the kind of things that he did with his goofball. Still left the entire state bankrupt and screwed up. The Democrats come in and balance the budget. Now they have $100 million surplus, or is that $100 billion? So the whole idea is all these things that happen there, but there was incidents with the CIA and other things happening at the Cabazon Indian reservations around there, some sort of scandal, and so forth that happened there. But you have that giant training base called 29 Palms, which is about 20 miles from Giant Rock. So you got all sorts of things going on there. This is also a major earthquake area. So this is where the giant earthquakes, because Giant Rock is close to Landers, California, where they had the giant 9-10 point earthquake centered there, which I was in Palm Springs at the time, and quite a frightening thing to go through. People don't understand. You can't even stand up. The ground's shaking that much. So all the things that happened there, the water was... half the water in my spa was kicked out. Now, this was above ground spa, hot tub. Half the water was dumped out of that. Can you imagine the kind of force and movement that is? You're talking about 500 gallons or whatever the hell was in there. Wow. So all of this stuff is major earthquake area that happened there. So it is quite interesting. It's also some gossip at Giant Rock was the fact that at the turn of the century that there's supposed to be some earth changes. And it didn't happen because Giant Rock, the rock itself, took the energy in and stopped the major earth changes. Also, this is where the San Andreas Fault starts and where Edgar Cayce stated California would break off from the rest of the continent, and it would start in this Coachella Valley. But the earthquake, apparently, the Giant Rock took the energy in to the rock to stop these massive earth changes. Now, what's interesting about that is that Giant Rock kind of had a part of it that was kind of overhanging. I'm not sure how to describe it. You could say it's like a muffin that you turned on its side and there's kind of a little bit hanging over. Well, this broke off. Now, it's been there for hundreds of millions of years and never broke off. Yet that year that it was supposed to happen, that piece of the rock broke off. Here we go again. Is it real or is it Memorex? Did it happen? Is it metaphysical? Is it science? Well, quite coincidental again. So these are the amazing things that go on that I've personally been witness to. I spent a lot of time in Sedona. I spent a lot of time up in that area. And these are all part and parcel of what's particularly going on with all these things. So we need to fully understand the type of things that are going on there and the type of activity that goes on in so many places and what this whole extraterrestrial stuff is. But this is the kind of things that these reporters for these shows do and how they use and abuse you. And they're just ignorant, buffoonish people that know nothing about the subject matter. Now, Thoreau never read a book on UFOs before he talked to me. Neither did this woman. They have no idea what UFOs are. They don't even know what to ask. They go there and I don't know what they think they're going to ask. They don't know nothing. And they want you to act like a clown for them. They want you to be a monkey on a stick. And the bottom line is they don't even ever want to pay you. So this is the type of thing. They want to make lots of money off of you, but they won't even throw you the minimum amount of money or even, a certain amount of money, $500 or so, so you don't waste your time. So they're going to go spend that on a bottle of wine at dinner while you get nothing. So the whole idea is that we don't need these kind of people, and you got to be very careful if you work with reporters or anything else that you are very carefully watching what they're doing, and you make sure you're in control of the interview. You also want to make sure that you don't let them waste your time. You want to say the same things over and over again so they can't get you when you're picking your nose or you made a joke that they say that this is your personality. So handling the media is very, very carefully done, particularly any kind of televised or videotaped. Now, a lot of people you hear on YouTube and other places, and they talk for hours. Well, that's very fair. You can get your point across, and most interviewers are little weasels, so you can pretty much say anything. But the whole idea is that if you're going to do something that you give control, because you're going to sign your rights away to this. Another thing you shouldn't do, you should have very basic, but you don't allow them to spend hours and hours with you so that they can contrive some stupid story. If they can't get the story within an hour or two, bye-bye, Joel gone. Now, and basically, you should be demanding things like expenses, money for lunch, dinner, etc. If you're going to take my time, you're going to pay for all that stuff. If you have to travel someplace, you're going to have to pay me for my car. If they don't want to pay you for the interview, which technically you're not supposed to do with, quote, news, well, you have to pay the people's expenses, though. So, and all that, renting a car, going places, food, everything that goes with that, maybe even lodging. Well, you're going to have to pay for that. Well, you're not paying for the interview, but you can pay for the other things. If they don't want to do this, Joel gone. So we got to understand that this is the reality of what's going on in this, the way with it. So you have to be very careful. You have to know what you're doing. As I said, if you're on a show that isn't going to edit it, whether that's Art Bell or so many other interviews that are out there, and you're talking for, even potentially hours, well, generally you can get your point across. We're assuming, and you should make sure that ahead of time, that they're not going to edit what you say. So if they're going to edit what you say, you don't want to work with them. So obviously, you're not going to do something wrong on the air. You're not going to scream obscenities and say things that are illegal, but you want to get your point across. And if they're going to edit stuff out, you don't want to work with them. So these are all the ways to handle the media that you need to do and understand exactly where you stand with them. And anything that is photographed, any kind of interview show for anything, whether it's on cable or YouTube, if they're photographing you for a special they're going to put together, which means they're going to edit it, you shouldn't get involved with that without speaking with them carefully. And don't say anything off the record. And if they don't get what you want, you repeat it over and over again. And I would tell them that, well, you have to put this in your interview. I'm going to keep repeating it. There's no reason to get into hours of discussions about something you're not going to use. And that's what they do. 12 hours to do 3 minutes. Can you imagine that? How do you even go through stuff like that? Well, they're wasting your time and they know it. It's as simple as that. Well, you want to do that? Well, you don't waste somebody's time. You pay them for your time. Plain and simple. So, Always keep that in mind because the publicity is not worth it. You're not going to get anything from it. You're not going to get great sales. You're not going to add to things. You're not going to get lots of members. Of course, back then, cable TV and everything was very new, so we got virtually nothing from it. It's the same thing with the Art Bell Show. I think I got 30 or 40 people that contacted me, and that's it. You don't make a lot of money from it unless you're hawking something very specific. And of course, now you can be found. But if you go out there and you say, well, look me up on the web, my address is this, they're going to cut that out unless you verify that, which you have to get in writing. So when you go into these things, go very open-eyed. They are not your buddies. They're not your pals. They are not a news organization. They're an entertainment organization. They're there to exploit you and make money off of you, and they could care less. That's the reality. So keep that in mind if you ever deal with the media in any way whatsoever, and be very careful with interviews or anything else because they want to use and abuse you. Hopefully it's been helpful. Until next time.